Welcome to the NFL Stacking to Win It. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Justin Elick at Big Italy 42. You're talking stacks here. You got 4 ones that you are looking at, 2 top stacks, a value stack, and a contrarian. I mean, it had to be pretty tough. I mean, it feels like there's a lot of different ways you can go this week.
Yeah, I mean, especially like I mentioned kind of in the intro, there's that big millionaire maker for $3 on DK. You're going to see people stacking every team. And ultimately, I guess if you're going to max out entries, you could, but I don't see the reason to stack. I mean, there's probably at least 10 teams, so there's no reason that you would even stack those. And it's beyond the contrarian angle. It's just kind of stupid by that point, I think. But you never know. I mean, new year, you could see some guys with breakouts, but I think a couple of the top ones are pretty straightforward. Starting with that Steelers team there. Obviously, I despise the Steelers with every part of my being, but I mean, it's really hard to argue against this offense. I mean, they're in a good spot, and I mean, it's just Antonio Brown's the best receiver in the league. I don't even think it's particularly close. I mean, obviously, guys like Julio and Odell are great, but it's just such a high floor, especially with Martavis Bryant and Bell out for Williams and for Brown and even Roethlisberger in this full stack.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, Steelers always have that high upside potential. And you look at this Washington defense, I think, obviously they've made a few pieces and moves in the offseason, but overall I'm not expecting them to kind of be top 10 to where we shy away from. And I mean, obviously you don't either. I think there's a ton of upside. I don't think this Monday night game is really getting enough credit in terms of upside. Yeah,
and I mean, like you said, they did get some key pieces like Josh Norman, but and sure, Brown's going to see him for at least part of the time. But, I'm also expecting Brown, assuming this is a close game, and I think it should be because the Steelers' defense is still, I think, average at best. And, I mean, Kirk Cousins isn't going to have the season he did last year, but they'll be able to score some points on that defense. So, I mean, you're going to see Antonio Brown get, I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised, 12 to 15 targets in this one. And even if Norman gets in there, breaks up a couple passes, picks one off, whatever it may be, he's still going to catch 8 to 10 passes and get, I think, easily 100 yards, a touchdown. I just don't really care with Antonio Brown who he's matched up against because he's just so good.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And you talk also about D'Angelo Williams here as part of your stack. I mean, you look on FanDuel, I mean, certainly a reasonable price is $7,100, so he's not really costing you a ton to kind of add into that Steelers offense.
Yeah, and I mean, he's going to be obviously the lead back. He's going to get 15-plus carries. If they get off to a big lead, all of a sudden everybody who just went Roethlisberger Brown, you're not going to see as many targets for Brown late in the game. If they're up big, you're going to see them pounding the rock with Williams. And, they're not afraid to go power football inside that 5-yard line and just run. And sometimes it's coming too. And surprisingly, I mean, Williams was actually a pretty big part of the passing game last year, which I didn't expect right off the bat because he was never a big pass catcher in Carolina. But, this is a guy that even had, I think one game he had 12 targets. You're not going to see that. But if he gets 5, 6, 7 targets, especially on DK, I mean, he can add up those points in a hurry.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, efficient too. So, I mean, even if he does get 5 or 6 targets, I mean, he's catching 4 out of those, So,
yeah,
definitely a solid option. In terms of your top stack, number 2 here, you talk about the Saints and Raiders, Saints specifically. Obviously, you're looking at this game. I mean, it's the talk of the town kind of everywhere on both sides. I like adding Mark Ingram here to the stack as you did. I think he's a reasonable price, and kind of an overlooked part of his game is his role in the passing attack.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at his numbers from last year, and, he only played in 12 games, only started 10 of those. And, I mean, he had 50 catches. Obviously, he's not a Darren Sproles type that's going to take one to the house. He's not a guy that's going to make a lot of big plays in the passing game. But the volume in itself, I mean, over the years, it's been the situation with the Saints. They're going to get their running backs involved in the passing game. They always have. And with the volume of passing attack that the Saints have every year. I mean, it seems like Brees is close to 4,500, 5,000 yards like every season. Doesn't matter who he's throwing to. You have to respect the passing game, especially at home. And so it opens up huge holes for him to run the football. So even when he doesn't get any more than 12, 15 carries, he's efficient when he runs the ball. And especially on a full PPR site like DK, if he gets 5, 6 catches, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibility, gives you a nice high floor. Maybe he punches in a couple touchdowns. And, I mean, we know what Brandon Cooks can do. I mean, he's big, he's fast, and I mean I guess he's not that big, but he's fast, and I mean he could take one to the house at any time. And I mean I even mentioned Willie Snead in there. I don't think he has much upside, but on DraftKings at least at his price, I think that maybe you put him in instead of Brandon Cooks to be a little bit different. Get yourself maybe 12 to 15 points and get a little ownership there.
Yeah, in terms of value, I mean, Snead's a guy. I mean, obviously, you talked about in the wide receiver piece as well for DraftKings, so certainly a nice addition there. And you also referenced, I mean, obviously, many of us are aware of Drew Brees at home compared to on the road. It's a huge difference. I mean, as you stated here, average 28 DK points at home compared to 17 on the road. And if you didn't know, now you know, because that is one thing to always consider with the Saints offense.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a huge, huge difference. Like, I mean, if he was putting up those numbers, his home numbers, every game, I mean, he'd be one of, if not the highest scoring quarterback last season. I mean, you look at he already was number 2 as far as DK points per game, and that was with him averaging significantly less on the road. So, I mean, Drew Brees he seems expensive, and he is, but especially when he plays at home, I mean, he's just an excellent option in all formats because he always just finds a way to get himself 300-plus yards, get that 300-yard bonus, and, I mean, just has a ridiculously high floor at home.
Yeah, definitely. And talking about a value stack next year, you're staying within that same game with the Raiders. You're talking Derek Carr, Amari Cooper, and then you also toss in a couple of honorable mentions here within kind of your analysis.
Yeah, and, I mean, I was looking for a team that was, a big-time value, guys like 5 to 6K, and I didn't want to go with the obvious Dak Prescott option because everyone's going to be on him, and that's obviously he's a value. Des Bryant, I'm not in love with playing Des Bryant this week. It's not that it's a bad matchup by any means, but for me I'll play Dak and I'll play Zeke, and I'll not worry about pairing him with anybody. But I mean, I think relative to the top wide receivers, and I do think that Cooper will be one of the top wide receivers this week and really for most of the season, his price is significantly lower. I mean, you look at him compared to Antonio Brown, $2,600 cheaper on FanDuel and $2,200 cheaper on DraftKings. And I mean, significantly better matchup. Obviously, he isn't Antonio Brown, which is why there's such a big discount. But I mean, if he can come close to Brown's production for probably a third of the ownership, maybe half the ownership, then I mean, he can definitely set you apart in a tournament right there against that Saints defense that Football Outsiders had him last against the pass last year, and I'm not going to predict that they'll be last again, but I mean, I don't see them getting any better.
No, I don't either. Bottom 5 again. I mean, they didn't really make a ton of changes. I know their rookie up front that they drafted got injured, so it doesn't seem like they're going to be any better. And Vegas is predicting kind of a shootout back and forth. So I like these calls. I like the Raiders. You also talk about adding a possible running back, Latavius Murray, who I know on DraftKings is a really nice value. DeAndre Washington, you talk about here, is kind of the sleeper guy. Obviously gained a little bit of hype in preseason, kind of a do-it-all type back, more versatile in the passing game. He would be an intriguing value. I mean, if that hits, that's really separating yourself from the field. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, he's $3,700 on DraftKings. He's cheap on FanDuel too. I mean, he's a guy that, people are going to go with a full stack, which you're going to see a ton of those, especially in those big tournaments. You'll see guys like Lat Murray in there. And Washington probably have not much less ownership, I would imagine, than Murray because he is so much cheaper. But he's the kind of guy that he doesn't cost you much. If he doesn't pan out, that's not the kind of guy that's going to kill your lineup. If he gets you 4 or 5 points, at $3,700, you got plenty of other ways to still get yourself tons of points at every other position. So I don't think there's much risk there with him. I think it's a lot of upside, though, with his potential. I mean, we saw him in, Texas Tech last year. I mean, the guy has the ability to take it to the house anytime. So I think he's the way to kind of set that stack apart because I don't think that Cooper Carr is going to be really super low owned, but it might be my favorite quarterback and wide receiver pairing.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of upside for the price. Talking to contrarian stack, I like this one quite a bit here. Texans versus the Bears. You're looking at this Texans offense. Obviously, 2 new pieces here, Brock Osweiler, Lamar Miller, and then obviously going up and pairing them with DeAndre Hopkins, who was just a monster last year. Ton of upside here with these 3 guys.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I talked about it the other day on the wide receiver show it didn't matter who was throwing the ball to Hopkins last year. I mean, we're talking terrible quarterbacks. Like TJ Yates doesn't even exist in a player pool anymore, at least on DraftKings. I don't know if he's on any other one. I don't know why he would be, but I mean, Brandon Whedon is a guy who should not have last year. I mean, as a quarterback or probably anything else. So I mean, these guys were getting the ball to him. A couple of them had multiple touchdown games. And Osweiler's a guy that he's pretty cheap. His FanDuel salary isn't significantly cheap, but $6,300 on DK. Obviously, you've got that 300-yard bonus. 3 of his last 4 games last year, he got really close to that, only hit it once. But, you know, I don't think it's that much of a difference for him going from Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders to DeAndre Hopkins, and now Braxton Miller. Obviously, I love Braxton Miller, but we all know how athletic he is. It's yet to be seen if he's going to make a big impact right away, but he's another guy you could set in that stack and kind of set yourself apart. And, I mean, we talked about Lamar Miller the other day too, so there's a ton of weapons in this offense, and they get everyone involved. No one's stopping Hopkins. They couldn't last year. And then, you know, of course, with Lamar Miller, short passing game, whatever it may be, you might end up getting a lucky little dump-off screen pass for a score.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we saw Miller. I mean, it was against this Houston team where he showed off his immense upside. I like these guys quite a bit, and I mean, the Osweiler price on DraftKings is certainly worth a look in GPPs, just because I think out of that group he's going to be the lowest owned. And then looking at the Chicago defense, I mean, the secondary's banged up. Most of them are going to miss this week 1, so this is really an opportunity to exploit Houston here.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, other guys around his price tag there. I mean, you got Jimmy Garoppolo against Arizona, no thanks. Cutler against Houston, maybe, but who really trusts him? Mariota, Alex Smith, Tannehill against Seattle. Like, there's not much there, and you know that obviously Dak Prescott will be the highest owned cheap guy. And I think when people are paying down, they're just going to go straight down to Prescott, and that's it. Because I mean, he's pretty much minimum salary everywhere. So I definitely think he's the one option down there that I'm actually considering.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Anyone miss the cut here? I mean, a couple other ones that you were maybe taking a look at.
As much as I don't like six, and it's a good defense, I think the Jets do have a potential to put up some numbers. I wouldn't go with the full stack. I don't know Forte necessarily, but Marshall, Decker, Fitzpatrick, because I do think they'll score a couple touchdowns. And it's not to say I think they have a huge ceiling, but I do think they have the potential to be, you know, sub 5% guys that can get a couple touchdowns and kind of set you apart. So I do like that. Obviously, Bortles, Jackson Hearns, or Bortles, Robinson Hearns was another one, but they're still pretty pricey. So I kind of left them out, but I'll definitely have some Jag stacks too.
Yeah, definitely. Those are nice contrarian pieces. So that's going to wrap it up with the Stacking Pod this week. Be sure to check out DailyFantasyCafe.com for all the great tools and content.